need remedial programming. We will take the good name of North Reading down quite a few notches by dropping graduation requirements. Kids need electives. They need levels 3 and 4 of a foreign language. They need real accounting classes and real financial planning classes. They need classes in the science to get them into the biotech areas. Those are where the job markets are. That's what the colleges are going to start looking for kids, because that's how they get their reputation, from feeding the employment market. And we know the governor's beefing up the biotech industry here in the state. So we need to be feeding kids into these pipelines. I don't think cutting back at the high school graduation requirements or the elective programs should be the first place we should look. And as distasteful as it is, I think we can really look at cutting some of the electives at the elementary level and getting something more in place there. I don't think you'll see any parent group or enrichment group come together at a high school level and give the kids what they'll be cutting. So I'd like to look at a model that would, how much could we save if we looked at something like that?
The problem is that's where you start the foundation. And when you, and you know, in fact, the Readiness Project goes toward even more early into the pre-K and funding that. And so, and the reason for that is that is the time that you start the beginning, the foundation. And if you don't do it then, they have no interest down the line. So you're hurting the kids over the whole of their life by not providing that front end. You know, again, the problem is that we are on the bottom. We are so thin now, we have no place to cut. And yeah, we'll be at the same problem next year. You know, every year it's going to be the same problem with funding. The governor did get one thing right, and a quote that he had was, "It's important to the greatest extent possible to protect education in these tough economic times." That's a quote from him on Friday. And he, you know, again, he funded the Chapter 70 part of local aid fully, but the rest of it is going to come into play. But at least he acknowledged that need, that education is a critical factor. Critical factor.
We all know how cheap talk is, Cliff. Talk is very cheap. I think it comes, you know, Jerry mentioned, you know, do we go to the community and ask for an override? That's I agree, but it's not a solution, because we've discussed we can go for an override every year or every 2 years, basically the way that the budget grows. It comes down to two things. It's the state funding process, and as Maureen said earlier, it's contracts. And we have contracts that have been in existence for, I'd like to say hundreds of years, but I know it's not hundreds, but they started, I don't know how many years ago, 40, 50 years ago, and so they've built up from there, and you can't go in overnight and say, okay, we're gonna start from scratch, and we're gonna revise this whole thing. It doesn't work that way, and I don't know how you approach that. Cliff and Maureen and I are active members on the email listserv for the Mass Association of School Committees, and several people have joked we should just let all the towns become insolvent. You know, then that's, you know, everybody goes bankrupt, and then you can start over again. It's not going to happen, but it seems like people are looking at that kind of drastic measure to try to start over, because the funding is not coming from the state at the level that it needs to.
The thing is that we get, again, the funding from the state share, the Chapter 70, is done by formula.
Right.
And we just happen to have demographics that don't line up with that at all. And we, you know, rather bitterly on the listserv and my letter to the governor back in December, I made the point that that's extremely unfair. We get about $2,200 per student in Chapter 70. There are communities that are getting as much as $14,000 per student. and the average is around 46, 4,700 per student, twice what we get. And there are a lot of communities, by the way, they get less than we do, but not too much less, because we don't get very much. That formula needs to be modified, and it needs to be fixed so that it doesn't look at our situation quite the same way as it does. Again, it's unfair. If we had a lot of non-English speaking people, if we had a higher percentage of low-income people, then instantly we would go up in the amount of money that we would get. But the formula really isn't very fair.
I want to make one more statement. I'm going to, since the administrators are here tonight, I want to ask for any comments. I always feel that, we talk about getting more of a share from the town budget, from the total budget, but we're always the elephant in the room. We already get between 60 and 70% when you take into account healthcare costs, retirement costs, et cetera, which come right off the top of our budget, but then get applied in the total spending at the end of the year. And so I know people look at this and they say, what do you mean you want more of a percentage? You're already getting 60, 65, 70%, but, as Cliff has mentioned before, and this is my head scratcher all the time, we're getting that much of a percentage, yet we're still at the bottom of the barrel in per pupil spending, and it just doesn't, it's hard to make sense of that. And I don't know what the answer is right now, other than more state spending.
When the rest of the town is at 16th from the lowest per person in the state,
When we're equal.
then we're equal. So they've got a long way to come back down, I think, before they get to that 16.
Or maybe they can come down a little and we can go up a little.
Or, alternatively, the town can decide that they're willing to cough up more money in their taxes in the form of an override to cover that extra services they get on the general government side of the town budget. They're very, very easy to balance this off. Well, is the town budget and the school budget? It's not the way it is. The whole thing is the town budget. There's a school portion and a general government portion. And those need to be balanced off, and they're not very balanced right now.
Any comments for any administrators? You've been here tonight. I know you've been working hard on this with Dr. Troughton and Carl. I'm just interested in any feedback that any of you want to give. Come on. All right, good.
You said that how frustrating it is for you to be seated where you are as a group of professionals. It's very frustrating for us. We've worked very closely on the information that's been presented to you. All of us not happy with any of the things that are on there, but collaboratively discussing these things in the best interest of the district of North Reading Public Schools. So at least for myself, before we deviate from the areas that we discuss, I think we need to, if it means coming back again and having these conversations with the committee, I think we'd be happy to do that. But we understand what is on paper in front of you right now. We're not excited about it. We don't expect anybody to be excited about it. But we do believe it allows us to move forward in some aspect of work that we can be proud of for our students. So before we start to look at new things, please consider the things that we've discussed already.
And I can't speak for everyone, but I think I went at this with the philosophy trying to keep the whole pre-K-12 package in mind of having a very balanced approach to where we reduce. And Maureen, I do respect your position on the high school, but we thought a lot about it, and I've had a lot of conversations with John, and I'm not speaking for him, but I think the old adage, less is more, may play to your major concern, which is the kids who aren't getting core courses, which are appropriate, and getting them where they need to go for college. So should they, by doing something like addressing the electives, it might allow us to maintain reasonable class sizes in those core courses and deliver better instruction to those kids. So there's a lot of detail behind these very surface tags that are here, which I think any of us would be happy to discuss. And I think I'm very concerned about reducing programs at the elementary school as the way to solve the problem. Very much because it is the foundational piece from which we grow. So those are my 2 cents on this.
4 cents. Any more cents out there?
Christine, can I ask you some questions on special ed? Not that I'm questioning you, but when we had a conversation on the listserv recently, a member in another town pointed out some information about our special ed. And when we send children to outplacement facilities, do you have the option to look at the rates and choose the facility based on the rates?
No.
Okay.
To put it simply, certainly we keep those in mind. But remember that nearly a third of the students who are out of district were unilaterally placed. And so those parents chose those facilities, and I'm sure that they're not looking at what the cost was. We use a large number of our students are at our collaboratives, which are probably the most cost-efficient programs, or at other public schools. And so that I did see that number in the email that you sent, but I'm not quite sure what people are really comparing. I'd need to talk to people, because our figures are very consistent with the other North Shore communities, which we have compared. The percentage of out-of-district students is very consistent. The amount we spend on those out-of-district students is similar. But remember that 1 or 2 students at the very high end who are extraordinarily needy could balance way over $100,000. And so that can skew all of your other numbers far out of line. So you'd really have to look at that.
You say a third, how many
About 15.
15 unilaterals?
That was wow.
And pretty much between 2 schools.
That's another issue that the state has got to, in my opinion, step in and solve.
That's a high number.
I think that school committees and legislators need to be extraordinarily vocal with the new commissioner of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed about that.
In our special education transportation, do you have to go out to bid for them?
We don't personally go out to bid, because anything that we do in the town, we have our own drivers for. But we contract with the Scene Collaborative, and that's a very large contract, and we're a member of that group, and so they contract, and the figure's quite low. So I'm surprised, I was surprised at that number too, and I really don't know what they're totally looking at.
Right. I just wanted to bring that up. Was there anything else that she
No, those are the 2
mentioned?
main ones that we were, I guess the statement was we're twice the state average for out-of-district tuition, but as you say, that can include a lot of factors.
Right.
Our range goes from 12,500 to over 100,000.
I contacted the Department of Education to try to track down that tuition average that you're referring to, and I learned something. You learn something, knew something every day. I learned that the majority of districts in Massachusetts are choice districts, and the funds that they receive are considered tuition funds. So those choice dollars that we don't receive in North Reading tends to make our tuition costs seem very high because they're not offset with incoming revenues.
That would make sense. Good catch.
If I could, Mr. Lewis, I'd like to just follow up on Pam's point on the high school program. Each year that I come into you in the springtime to endorse the program of studies and course offerings for the following school year, I've been very proud of the work that the high school staff has done in the last 5 years that I've been the principal to introduce 15 new electives for the high school students. And it's sad, it saddens me now to hear that we may be jeopardizing those course offerings for the future, but I think, as both Pam and Sean said, that in the spirit of cooperation and working with each other and recognizing the needs of each of the various levels, elementary, middle, and high school, none of us is happy with what we're confronted with now.